everybody, this is Julie again. So I'm trying to be a little more consistent about making these videos. Alright, so I just wanted to go ahead and get started on this and explain why the hypnotherapy is so important to me and how it is that I got on this journey of being so fascinated with the hypnotherapy. So let me start off first by saying that I'm a person who's in recovery, and what that means is that I spent probably close to 20 years of my life drinking and doing drugs and really just making a huge mess of my life, and it came to a boiling point after my husband died, and there was a lot of things that happened, and I'll kind of go backwards on that throughout videos, but there was a lot of things that happened whenever my husband died. But at the end after he passed, I went into a huge relapse, and it was really bad. I ended up getting in a lot of trouble, ended up catching a lot of charges, and the worst of it was that they took my kids from me. And when they took my kids, I said, I've got to do something, I've got to change. I'd been in treatment before, but I'd never really taken it seriously. So I opted to go back to treatment. And while I was there and decided if I'm going to take this seriously, then I'm going to have to go through and do all the things that they expect you to do in treatment, which is get a sponsor, work the steps. If you know anything about recovery, you know all about that stuff. So one of the major things that you have to do whenever you're working these steps is find a higher power. If you don't have one, if you don't believe in God, if you're struggling with God, if you're mad at God, whatever it is, you've got to find something that connects to you. So I had been in church, I had experienced the church experience, and it just didn't really connect for me, because they said things like, well, if you're this and if you're that, and if you're bisexual, or if you have homosexual relationships, or if you cuss, or if you're a sin, or you do this, and you don't ask for God's forgiveness immediately or sometime soon after, that all this stuff's basically being written down and that you're going to go to hell for it. So granted, if you're churchgoers, you're probably going to disagree with that, but that was my perception of it. So I said, this isn't really going to work for me. I've got to find something that does work for me. And the treatment center that I went to was really small. There was about 12 of us. It was a co-ed treatment center. There was about 12 of us, maybe 14 of us. And they didn't have, there was a Bible there. There was a whole lot of AA material there. But I said, I'm going to have to think outside the box here whenever I figure out what this higher power thing means to me. And they said, you can create your own concept. Okay, let's create our own concept. Where am I going to get the material to create my own concept of God? So I went to this bookshelf, only bookshelf in the facility. I'm not very tall, so let's just say that this bookshelf was 6 feet tall and had 5 shelves on it. There might have been a total of 30 books on it. Most of them had to do with AA. There was a couple Bibles, a couple random things, a couple literature books for people to read for entertainment value. And at the bottom of this shelf was a discarded book that you could tell nobody had ever really read. It was kind of flipped over on its side, and it was called Memories of God and Creation. And I was like, what is this? This is interesting. So I picked it up and I started reading it. And what it is it's a book written by a woman. I want to tell you her name, but I will absolutely butcher it. Shakuntala Modi. She was a psychiatrist, and she had went through, after reading a couple of her books, I realized what she had done is went through a lot of experiences of trying to fix people's mental health issues, and found that it didn't matter how many medications she gave them, she just wasn't fixing the problem. So she started looking at the other things that she had learned in her residency. And some of the things that she learned in her residency was hypnosis and hypnotherapy. So she had a couple clients, she offered to try this on them. They said yes, and she found very fascinating and positive results. What she also found was that she was able to reach into basically the soul. I'll talk more later about like the difference between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind and what that stuff means, because I'm currently taking hypnotherapy classes myself. But she got deep into this hypnotherapy stuff and started going into these past life regressions. So bear with me if you don't know what I'm talking about. Past life regressions are whenever you're able to go into, you can go into this life, you can go into like memories that you forgot about. You can go into the womb and see what your experience was in the womb, which I've not done, and I'm going to presume has a lot to do with your feelings in the womb, what you can hear while you're in the womb, how that affects what kind of person you're molded to be. So she starts going into these past life regressions and goes into their previous lives and goes into their previous lives. And she was able to find enough candidates that were willing to let her go deeper and deeper and deeper into these past lives until she had experiences and memories that these souls had of what God is and when it created and why it created and how it created and where it came from. So to give you the short part of the story, yes, there was a God and we were all connected to it. So at a point, God said, we need to do more. You guys need to be able to branch out and live your own lives and do your own thing. But it's kind of like, you know, the baby in the womb. No, I don't want to do that. I want to stay right here where it's warm and safe and comfortable. But God said to do it. So we're going to do it. And we're going to trust him. And we're going to believe that he's not going to put us on a path that we're not supposed to go onto. But just like anything else, you've got resistance. So there's this little section, little soul section. I said, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. I am rebelling against this decision. And that's what he did. And that's who we call the devil, Satan, whatever it is you call him. And where he was at, he was able to manipulate the other people around him and say, or the other souls around him and say, hey, you know, we don't do this. This is a bad idea. So when God created and sent the souls out to be part of the world, the devil and his followers did their own thing. So what I learned later, there's a whole lot. If you ever read this book, look into this book, I highly suggest it, especially if you're somebody like me who just doesn't feel like there's a guy in the clouds who is writing down everything that we did wrong so that he has good enough reason to banish us to a burning, fiery existence. I just don't buy it. I'm sorry. So if you feel the same way, I highly suggest that you read this book. So there was a passage in there that was life-changing for me. And basically what it said, this is me paraphrasing, I'll try to get it as verbatim as I can, but if you ever buy the book, I think it's on page 21. God does not judge us. It is we who judge ourselves in the afterlife when we see the wrongdoings that we have done through our life on earth. And that God does not send us to hell. We are either manipulated, tricked, or trapped by Satan and his followers into believing that we deserve to go to hell. So what that told me was, yeah, there is a God or an entity. I call it an entity, a spiritual entity that is connected. So if you imagine this big ball right here, you've got this big ball. Say you believe in Jesus, say you believe in Allah, say you believe in Buddha, whatever it is you believe in. They're all sources to the entity, or what they call Godheads in this book. And so if you got this big ball, you would imagine these Godheads around this ball. Everybody else connects to these Godheads. So if you're a follower of Jesus, then that's the Godhead that you're going to follow. And that's the spiritual source that is going to lead to the larger entity that we call God. So I'm as I said, I'm a past addict, so I don't really believe in going to the middleman. I like going to the source, so I just talk straight to God. But it's whatever you want to do. None of this stuff, nobody's wrong. What this means is nobody's wrong, that we're all right. Whatever it is you believe in, unless you believe that there's nothing, we're all right. If you believe in that there's nothing, I highly suggest that you take a look backward into your life and tell me, like, how did certain things just fall into place the way that they did? How did you have these experiences that you had that led you into having a lesson that you needed for a future issue that occurred and brought you to where it is that you needed to be? Because I can go so far into these things of how my last relapse, my husband dying, everything, all that. So that whole huge, horrible situation, every single bit of those things needed to happen to get me to where I am now. And where I am now is somebody who's more than 4.5 years sober, has completed a bachelor's degree program, working on hypnotherapy certifications, case manager in a place where I have the autonomy to do whatever it is that I want to do. And it's a place called mindfulness, which means that, like, we're a little more open-minded and kind of out-of-the-box thinkers than you would get at, like, some kind of corporate office for mental health. And I'm happy. And eventually I even found the person that I know I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. So all that stuff had to happen to get me here. And I had to learn so many things. I had to become a very egotistical person in my last relapse because I had false ego that was driven by temporary money that gave me the confidence that I needed to be able to go through and do everything that I've done since then. So, moving on a little bit, this higher power thing, this hypnotherapy thing, like, after I read this book, I was like, this hypnotherapy stuff is amazing. Like, she was able to go back into these other people's lives so far back that she found out when God created. Sorry if you hear background noise, I'm trying to walk. So I went into some of her other books, and I'm not somebody that really reads something from cover to cover. I'm more of a peruse through and find what I need, and it usually works for me. But I went into some of her other books, and I started learning about other forms of hypnotherapy. Like, it's not just about getting back to how far it is that you need to go. Like, some people need to go into regressions, past life regressions or current life regressions or womb regressions, because they need to know why it is that they're acting a certain way, or what patterns that it is that they're repeating that keeps bringing them back around to the same exact thing. So some people, let's take addicts for an example, have had something vulnerable occur in their life. Me, for example, I grew up with, my mother was married to an alcoholic who used to beat her regularly, and it was a very traumatic childhood. And I witnessed a lot of that stuff. And later on that turned into a pattern that I repeated, except for I escalated on it. But I couldn't figure out why it was that right after their relationship ended, I started drinking and doing drugs. Until I got into these books, because it makes sense to me now. So I was vulnerable. I was internally wounded. Mental health was a stigma back then. Like, people didn't go to the therapist and things like that. That meant that you were weak. How stupid were we? So I was spiritually wounded, which means when you're spiritually wounded, or you're vulnerable, or you're sick, or you're in the hospital, whatever it is, it has you down. You're not firing on all cylinders, which means that, remember I talked about Satan and his minions that disappeared and went on their own? They continue to collect followers. They continue to collect followers because when we die, we're looking back on our lives and feeling so much guilt because of all the bad things that we did, that they're able to step in and say, you don't deserve to be up there. You don't even want to be up there. That's not the kind of person you are. Your soul is meant to be down here with us. We have a purpose. We have a mission. We're going to bring more people down here with us. We don't need you guys up here thinking that everything's so good and great. You know everything's not so good and great. Look at what your life just was. And they believe them and they follow them. So what is their purpose? Their purpose is to catch us when we're vulnerable. And give us migraines. Give us eating disorders. Give us addictions. Give us a bunch of mental health issues, physical health issues that we don't know how to deal with. We don't understand why it is that this is happening. Why is God punishing me? What have I done in my life that has made me deserve this? You can do anything. You just happen to have a vulnerable state in your life. And because of that, darker entities were able to get in. And they just kind of embed in there, hang out. Whenever you're thinking about doing something and you're like, I don't know, maybe I'm not good enough to do that. Maybe I'm not capable of doing that. Maybe that's not my purpose. I'm just gonna fail if I try anyway. That's those darker entities that are getting in and telling you, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? So you got to wipe those things out. So that's what she was doing in some of these other hypnotherapy sessions she was doing, is catching these darker entities that were attached in people and helping them find the light. Not just getting rid of them and telling them go back to your leader, helping them find the light. Because that's what the sorry, vehicle going by. That's what God is the light. So she's not saying to these darker entities like, get out of here and go back to Satan. She's saying, hey, there's a better way. You're better than this. Maybe you should try something different. Maybe you should try to find your own light. And when you're finding your own light, maybe you'll find a happier purpose. So that's one thing that she does. Or that hypnotherapy does, I should say. I'm saying she based off the person that wrote this book. Another thing is, there are sometimes people die and their soul kind of does what she calls shatters. And it goes in different directions. And it attaches to living entities. So when you do hypnotherapy on somebody and they're acting in mannerisms that aren't their own, it's very possible that they might have somebody else's soul attached to them, or a piece of it. So pulling back this piece of the soul and getting it back to making it whole. Not just saying, take the soul off my client. They don't want it there. They're saying, let's take the soul part off, and help it find the rest of its soul so it can go and be free and be where it's supposed to be. That's what hypnotherapy is. I know a lot of people say hypnotherapy, you're looking at like quitting smoking or being told to do something, and yeah, that can be the case. The being told to do something, the things that you see in movies and on stages, that's for entertainment, honey. Nobody's going to sleep and not waking up and not knowing what it is that they're supposed to be doing, or doing what it is they were told to do. Like, after I read some of this stuff by this Dr. Modi, I decided to go into my own experiences, and I decided I was going to go find hypnotherapy for myself. The problem that I had was I wanted her. I wanted to find her. So I looked for her, and I found where she practiced. Just to give you some insight, I live in West Virginia. Keep the jokes to yourself. This psychiatrist practiced out of Wheeling, West Virginia, which from where I'm standing right now is maybe an hour and a half, possibly 2-hour drive. I can get there. But her books were published in '96, and she's not been practicing for long enough that when I tried to connect with her, and she's not answering, so I don't even know if she's still alive. What I do know is that this isn't a dead practice. So I looked for other people, and I was working at this treatment center, and I used to talk about this stuff all the time because I was so fascinated with it. And I was like, I'm gonna find it and I'm gonna have it done. And I had a guy message me after he left treatment, and he lived in Detroit, and he said, hey, I came up here and the therapist that my case manager hooked me up with does that hypnotherapy stuff that you're always talking about. Let me get his number, please. Now, I can tell you that I was living in Charleston whenever I first started looking for Dr. Modi. At this point, I was living in Parkersburg. I could have found somebody else long before he called me and told me that his therapist does hypnotherapy. But this is what I want you to understand. I wasn't ready for it then. I wasn't ready for it whenever I left treatment after I found that first book. I wasn't ready for it a year in. I wasn't ready for what my soul was going to find out, or what I was going to find out about my soul. I wasn't ready for any of that stuff. So at 2.5 years into my recovery, or actually it was 2 years into my recovery, when this guy tells me, you know, I've got this hypnotherapist for you, so give me his name and number. I didn't have to go to Detroit. It's like 5 hours from here. I didn't have to do that. But I did, and I'm glad that I did. And I had an amazing experience. It was phenomenal. It was traumatic and horrible, but it was life-changing. I needed to know all that stuff, and I needed to wait all that time because there's a perspective that has to happen. And I'm learning some of this stuff in class. If you are a person who has no solutions, if you are a person who feels like everything is just gonna be wrong, and there's never going to be anything that works for you, or if you are a person who is manipulative, narcissistic. If you're narcissistic, honey, it's a personality disorder. You should look into it. If somebody tells you you're narcissistic, look into it. There's nothing wrong with that. You just need to make some character changes. But if you're any of those people, then you're not going to be able to do hypnotherapy effectively. If I had went into it whenever I found out about it, I would have taken everything that I learned and said, well, that's why I am the way that I am. It's just who I am. I'm just going to continue to be this kind of person because my soul is destined to this damnation that I keep experiencing lifetime after lifetime. But that's not the case. What I learned was that my soul has been going through it. And it is time for me to give it a break. My soul has been searching for happiness in all the wrong places, in all the wrong men, in all the wrong women. And it just needs happiness. And that because of what my soul is used to, I have spent a lifetime, in this lifetime, running from my problems, running from my addiction, running from my charges, running from my family, running from myself. I have spent a lifetime running. And I felt like I had stopped running. I really did. But after going through the hypnotherapy session that I went through, I discovered that I wasn't trying to stop running. What I was trying to do was make a career out of running. I had these grandiose ideas that would have worked, that would have been great, and they're great for somebody who doesn't have kids, who doesn't have a family that needs stability. So I came back that weekend after Michigan and I changed everything. I changed my career path. I changed my mindset. I changed my perspective on relationships, because prior to that hypnotherapy, I was just going to die alone. And I'm not going to say I didn't say that. If you know me, you know I said that many times after that hypnotherapy session, because that was just how I was feeling. I started changing and saying, maybe I just need to be happy. I felt like I was happy. But happy people don't need to run. Happy people don't need to push away everybody that they get involved with for whatever one reason or another. push them away. So I had to do some reevaluation on myself. And in the next video, I will give you a huge breakdown on what that hypnotherapy experience was and what happened whenever I went up there and what happened in my session, and give you an idea of what it is that you'll experience if you ever decide to choose hypnotherapy. So what I want to say is the reason that I'm starting this channel is because you can change your thinking by quitting smoking, by not eating carbs or sugar, or not self-sabotaging, or not thinking badly about yourself. You can change your thinking if you want to through basic hypnosis. But if you really want to get to the root of why it is, get away from this guy, Ramon. If you really want to get to the root of why it is that you are prone to act the way that you act, then I highly suggest hypnotherapy regressions. Doesn't mean that you can't start off with hypnosis and lead into regressions. But I highly suggest that you get there. The reason that I'm starting this channel not only is to raise awareness about how, I'm not going to say the word important. I'm going to say substantial. Hypnotherapy is substantial. It's not only to raise awareness about that, but it is also because I asked the person that was directing one of my virtual classes, I was asking about practice, because like I said, I live in West Virginia. There's not a lot going on, you guys. I've done a lot of traveling. Not everybody else here has. So sometimes you're dealing with very closed-minded people. And that's okay. Everybody gets their own time, and sometimes that's just what your life is. And if you're happy with it, go for it. You need to be open-minded for hypnotherapy, though. So I asked her, I said, is it going to be hard for me to practice in rural West Virginia? As I was saying it, she was shaking her head. I said, no. Pre-COVID, she said yes. Pre-COVID, it probably would have been. Post-COVID, no. Now, I personally think that the experience that I had with my hypnotherapy was necessary to happen in person. We did a couple of virtual sessions prior to my going up there, just to kind of get me into the feel of what the meditative state will look like. And that's all it is, you guys. Nobody is putting you under. You are going into a meditative state. It is trance. The only reason this guy knew what I was experiencing inside of my head was because I was telling them. Nobody's trying to manipulate you. So we did a couple of those virtual sessions, and then I chose to drive up there. We probably could have done it virtually. And she said, pre-COVID, I would have said, yes, you need to do these in person. But we couldn't turn people down whenever COVID happened. So she got to the point of being able to practice virtually. So this would be my suggestion. If you want to practice, or if you want to try hypnosis or hypnotherapy, it's okay to do it virtually. And that's why I'm starting this channel, so I can have my own followers, because it's not going to be very long before I'm done. And if you ever want to try a virtual session once I'm finished with my certifications, we'll do it. And if you live, not in California, but like if you live somewhere where you say, hey, like I want to get into the regressions, and I also feel like it would be more substantial in person, come on, we'll do it in person. We'll do whatever it is we've got to do to help you save your soul, because this experience was life-changing for me. So that's all I'm going to say about it right now. I'm going to go ahead and shut down this video. I very much look forward. If you're watching this, like it, follow it, share it. I'm going to try to have at least one video a week, but it might escalate the more that I learn. And as I'm continuing to go through these classes, and as I get more comfortable on this YouTube channel, because this is a new experience for me, I will start jumping on here just like whenever something I think of something and put it on here, rather than writing it in my notebook. So I hope this was helpful. Like I said, like, follow, share, not just for me, but for you, for your people, for anybody that you think this might be helpful to. And I look forward to being able to post again. My next video will give you a full breakdown of what my hypnotherapy experience is in my past life regressions. See you next time.